Now, you and UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson are convening a roundtable on Monday on climate to try to ratchet up commitments ahead of COP26. What are you expecting from that meeting? What do you hope to make progress on specifically?
For me, the meeting is essentially a wake-up call. We are on the verge of a disaster, and there is a risk of a failure for the COP26. If you look at the last data that was published by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it was clearly stated that things are getting worse than what it was forecasted, and that we have truly a code red in relation to climate evolution. On the other hand, yesterday we had a publication by UNFCCC, that, as you know, is the organization of the UN that supports the COP, the international gathering on climate, saying, first of all, that with the so-called national determined contributions, the commitments made by member states according to the Paris Agreement about what they decided to do, if we take the ones presented until now, we will not reach 1.5 degrees of temperature rise at the end of the century. We will reach 2.7 degrees. And this is a catastrophic situation. And worst, according to those commitments made until now, when the scientific community tells us that we need to reduce emissions by 45% in the decade between 2020 and 2030, the present commitments lead to an increase of emissions of 16%. So, I mean, either countries understand that we are on the verge of a disaster and change course, many of them, others have done a lot and we have to recognize that, or we risk to have a COP26 that fails and we need to face a catastrophic situation in relation to climate. And I believe that this meeting is a very important meeting for a wake-up call with heads of state and government of developed countries, to make sure developed countries are able to correspond to the commitment made to provide financial and technical support to developing countries, namely the $100 billion per year that should be provided. And also understanding that the impacts of climate change are so devastating, namely in the developing world, small island development states, African countries, but even in the United States, let's be clear, the impacts are so devastating that we need to have half of the climate finance for adaptation to build resilience of the communities, and for the moment it's only 20%. So there are clear requests to developed countries, and also let's be clear, also emerging economies need to commit to more, need to be part of the reductions program. And until now, many emerging economies have objectives that are not ambitious enough. I'll give you an example, coal. If all the coal power plants that are planned at the present moment would be operative, we would no longer be able to reach 1.5 degrees. We would be above the 2 degrees, which means that the objectives, the targets of Paris would go up in smoke. So, I mean, it is clear that we need to create conditions. I suggested today in the summit hosted by President Biden, we need coalitions of countries that have the finance and the technological capacity with the countries that are still too dependent on coal to make sure that we have a quick transition. Because with the present pattern of energy transition in the world, we will not get there. So this wake-up call is, I think, essential to make sure that countries are able, from now to the COP, to present new commitments, to engage in a positive way in international cooperation, if we want the COP to be a success and if we want to rescue the planet.